The historical books begin with the book of Joshua and continue until 2nd Maccabees for the Catholic Bible. The books focus on God's supernatural help when people turn to God and try to live a good life. And they also describe what happens when people don't do that. And that is the story of the historical books.
But God would allow Moses to view the promised land from the top of Mount Nebo.
Look at the land with your own eyes, since you are not going to cross this Jordan. But commission Joshua and encourage and strengthen him, for he will lead this people across and will cause them to inherit the land that you will see. Deuteronomy 3:27.
It is then that God speaks to Joshua and encourages him to stay true to his calling.
Be strong and courageous. Be careful to obey all the law my servant Moses gave you. Do not turn from it to the right or to the left, that you may be successful wherever you go. Joshua 1:7. And the Lord said to Joshua, Today I will begin to exalt you in the eyes of all Israel, so they may know that I am with you as I was with Moses. Joshua 3:7.
And so the Lord instructs Joshua to tell the priests who carry the Ark of the Covenant to go down to the river Jordan and stand at the edge. As soon as their feet touch the water, the river stops flowing, and the whole nation crosses the Jordan on dry land, just as they had 40 years before at the Red Sea. Another miracle? Or is there some other explanation?
When an earthquake strikes just right, the banks of the Jordan River will be dislodged and deposited in the riverbed and will actually dam up the Jordan River. It's happened a number of times in recorded history. The most recent time in 1929, when the river was blocked up, dammed up for 20 hours. So that's an indication that at the time of the Israelite crossing of the Jordan River, there was earthquake activity.
After crossing the river and entering the Promised Land, the Israelites set up camp just north of Jericho.
Jericho was a known city. It was a city that had a famous wall already in Joshua's time. And to take that city first would be a very impressive beginning. They had to start off with a bang because they had no experience of fighting at all, really. And so in order to believe that this land was really promised to them, I think they had to start off with a resounding triumph.
Joshua does as God commanded. The Israelites march around the walls of the city for 7 days, and on the 7th day they march around 7 times, with 7 priests blowing 7 trumpets. And then the people of Israel give out with a shout, and the walls of the city collapse. The Israelites sack the city, killing all the inhabitants, setting it on fire.
The circling of the cities, the blowing of the shofar, the trumpets, the number 7 again, the 7 priests, the 7 times around, the 7 days, all of these have to do with the liturgy of the worship of ancient Israel and have nothing to do with military tactics whatsoever.
Some scholars believe that the walls of Jericho collapsed as a result of a powerful earthquake.
When the Israelites marched around the city that 7th time and those walls came down, that undoubtedly it was earthquake activity at that time as well.
If there was an earthquake, that doesn't explain to me why it was so well timed that Joshua's troops happened to be outside when it happened. So I'm not sure, even if you get a scientific explanation, that you've managed to clear up the mystery.
Ever wondered how the walls of Jericho fell down? The story of Jericho's walls is more than just a tale. Could there be real evidence supporting this biblical event? Archaeologists have uncovered fascinating findings in Jericho. They found collapsed walls and a unique layer of destruction. This destruction aligns with the biblical timeline of Joshua. The walls fell outward, not inward, supporting the biblical account. These discoveries challenge skeptics and excite believers. Jericho's walls are a testament to faith and history combined. What other biblical events might archaeology reveal?
Finding explanations that are natural for these events that happen at certain points in time when Joshua is entering the promised land and then conquering cities does not at all take away from the idea that God is causing these things to happen. Another miracle that occurs with Joshua, he's fighting the Amalekites and he needs more time to totally defeat them. So in the story of Joshua, it says that the sun stood still, and it stayed still for hours while Joshua mowed down the Amalekites. So again, if you look at that story, you go, well, no, of course the sun can't stop. But for hours, because we go around the sun, it isn't the sun that goes around us. At any rate, could it have been some local event? When we talk about the miracle at Fatima, where people saw the sun start to spin in the sky and move up and down and change colors, how did that happen? That happened 100 years ago. They actually have newspapers that talked about it. And yet, outside a 20-mile radius, nobody saw anything. So once again, we have to be open to how God works.
An estimated 70,000 people witnessed the miracle of the sun in 1917. Luckily, because of technology, we still have the accounts of doctors, newspapers, and general lay people who witnessed the miracle with their own eyes. Maria de Kupina, one of the earliest believers, she said,
"The sun turned everything to different colors, yellow, blue, and white. Then it shook and trembled. It looked like a wheel of fire that was going to fall on the people. They began to cry out, 'We shall all be killed.' Others called to Our Lady to save them. They recited acts of contrition. One woman began to confess her sins aloud, advertising that she had done this and that."
After Joshua's death, Israel again turned away from God and they started worshiping false gods. But every so often they'd turn back to God and pray, and God would send them a judge, and the judge would rule Israel and defeat their enemies, and then he'd die, and then they'd turn away from God again, and there'd be another judge that would come.
Gideon, the Lord's mighty warrior. It was a turbulent time for the Israelites. The Midianites, desert bandits, and other hostile tribes freely raided their farms every harvest, forcing them to abandon their fields for the hills. A farmer called Gideon is among those who flee for their lives. This misery is brought on the people because they worshipped false gods and were denied the Lord's protection. But the Lord would not abandon his people. An angel is sent to Gideon and given the Lord's assurance of support. Gideon is called Mighty Warrior. It is a prophetic compliment that is to define his role and destiny. The Lord needs just a few good men. Before going into battle, Gideon seeks further assurances from the Lord, who grants both his requests in the miracles of the dew and the fleece. Gideon then begins recruiting men for his army. There is overwhelming response, but the Lord does not need that many men. So Gideon, following the instructions of the Lord, tells the men that all who are afraid can leave. 22,000 men do just that. As there are still too many, the Lord asks Gideon to take the men to a pool. Here, only those who drink water from cupped hands brought to their mouths are allowed to join Gideon's army, but that leaves him with a mere 300 men. But this army will prove to be more than a match for their enemies, who number in their thousands. Gideon strikes back. When Gideon overhears enemy soldiers interpret a dream that confirms that the Lord has given him victory over the Midianites, he is overjoyed. He shares the good news with his men and immediately prepares his men for battle. Dividing his 300 men into 3 companies, he hands them trumpets and empty jars with lighted torches in them. In the planned night attack, just after the enemy's changing of the guard, Gideon and his men encircle the camp. Following Gideon's lead, the men blow their trumpets and break their jars. With the torches held high in their left hands and the trumpets in their right, all the men shout, "A sword for the Lord and for Gideon." The sound of the trumpets, jars breaking, and the sudden bright lights causes instant panic and terror amongst the Midianites. In this confusion, the Lord causes the enemy to turn on each other and kill themselves. As the enemy run for their lives, Gideon plans an ambush for them. He sends messengers throughout the hill country of Ephraim to cut off their retreat at the river Jordan.
There are a number of other judges that ruled Israel during this period. Samson took the Nazirite vow and had incredible strength as long as he didn't cut his hair. But when his secret got out, then he was as weak as anyone else, and he was hurt or put in prison after that. There's other judges as well. Deborah was the only woman judge, and she was given messages by God and told a general to go attack the enemy, and he did, and he had victory. There's a bunch more stories, but that's the story of the judges. And then we get to the last judge, who's Samuel.
After Israel was rescued from slavery in Egypt, they made a covenant with God at Mount Sinai and eventually came into the Promised Land. And there Israel was supposed to be faithful to God and obey the covenant commands. Before the book of Samuel, Judges showed how Israel failed at that task big time. It was a period of moral chaos, and it showed Israel's need for wise, faithful leaders. The book of Samuel provides an answer to that need. The book of Samuel's story focuses on three main characters: the prophet Samuel, where the book gets its name, and then King Saul, and after that, King David. And all three of them transitioned Israel from a group of tribes ruled by judges into a unified kingdom ruled by King David in Jerusalem.
There was a woman named Hannah. Hannah became pregnant and gave birth to a son, Samuel. One night, God spoke to him in his room, telling him about things that would happen in Israel in the future. God would use Samuel to speak to the Israelites over and over as a prophet. But the Israelites weren't satisfied with the prophet. Despite Samuel's warning against it, they demanded God give them a king. God told Samuel who to make king: a man named Saul. When the Israelites saw him, they shouted, "Long live the king!" The Philistines gathered a huge army. Some of the Israelites ran away in fear. But Samuel gave instructions to Saul that would lead to their victory. Saul grew impatient, and before Samuel got there, he offered the sacrifice himself. Saul's actions had terrible consequences. It was time for another king. God told the prophet Samuel that it was time for a new king and sent him to the house of a man named Jesse. Jesse had 7 sons and brought out each of them to meet Samuel. Samuel told Jesse that David, his youngest son, would be the future king of Israel. Shortly after this, an army of the Philistines, Israel's enemy, set up camp on a hill right across the valley from Israel's army.
Blessings be upon you, Jesse. On this day shall the Lord God of Israel choose himself a king from among your sons.
But Saul is our king.
God is not a man, that he should deceive you.
Which of my sons must it be? My first son, Eliab.
The Lord does not see as man sees. Men judge by outward appearances, but the Lord judges by the heart alone.
My second son, Abinadab. My third son, Shammah.
The Lord has chosen none of these men. Have you no other sons?